I had never been the type of person to break routine. My entire adult life was built on patterns that reassured me, patterns that whispered everything would be fine as long as I stayed dependable. Sunday dinners were the most important of those rituals. For over a decade, no matter the storms that had blown through my weeks, I always made it home to Oakwood Drive by 7 o'clock sharp. It did not matter if I had worked 70 hours or if flu had racked my body until I could barely stand. I never missed, not once. That was the role I played, the daughter who showed up. My mother liked to remind me of it often, her voice tinged with a pride I once thought was genuine. "Taylor, you are the steady one. I can always count on you." I used to beam at that, as if being reliable was a badge of honor, proof of my worth. That night I was more than tired. Work had bled into the weekend again, spreadsheets and audits chasing me long after I left the office. But the thought of my father's smile, the way he always carved into my casseroles as though they were feasts, made me press on. I had baked chicken in cream and herbs, his favorite, and the smell filled the car as I drove. Garlic, rosemary, melted cheese, the scent of belonging. By the time I turned onto Oakwood Drive, dusk had settled low across the neighborhood. Houses stood in their quiet rows, porches glowing with the early switch of lamps. And there, halfway down the street, was the yellow glow I knew so well. My parents' porch light was always on, casting that soft halo that used to comfort me. It meant I was expected. It meant someone was waiting. I parked at the curb. Lucas, my older brother, always claimed the driveway spot closest to the door. That was another habit I had never questioned. I balanced the warm dish in my hands, careful, reverent, and walked up the front steps. The wood was familiar under my feet, worn smooth from decades of use. Third step creaked. I skipped it without thought. When I reached for the screen door, a voice cut through the still air. My name. "Taylor will not be a problem. She never says no to family." The sound rooted me where I stood. It was my father's voice, calm, as certain as a hammer falling. My hand froze inches from the handle. Inside, conversation bounced across the kitchen tiles. Words carried in fragments, sharp edges of sound that sliced through me. "You cannot ask her for that much," my mother said, tight and nervous. 300,000, Lucas, that is insane." "It does not matter how insane," my brother replied, his tone hard and patient. "What matters is I need it handled before the audit digs deeper. You promised you would help." Then my father again, steady, confident. "We will. Taylor just got that promotion, senior analyst at the firm. She must be making at least 150 by now." The casserole did not tremble in my hands, but my body did. My heart pounded, hot blood rushing in my ears. I pressed closer to the doorframe, hoping I had misheard. "She probably gets bonuses too," Lucas added, careless. "She has always been the golden one." My mother sighed, softer now, as if soothing herself. "She works too hard. She always has. Maybe we could start small. Tell her it is for the roof. 30,000 just to fix the leaks. Later we can say medical bills, maybe I need a procedure." Lucas interrupted. "Spread it out. She will give it. She always gives." And then my father's voice, flat, almost proud. "Remember the business loan? 20 grand, no hesitation. She handed us her signing bonus, 40,000, just like that." Lucas laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Who does that?" I could not move. I could only hear myself breathing, shallow, uneven. A vision rose in my mind of all the Sundays I had stood here before, arms full, heart open, believing I was part of something good. "She still thinks we are a real family," Lucas said, sneering. "It is almost sad." "Do not talk about your sister that way," my mother said, brittle. "She is naive, Mom. She thinks bringing a damn casserole means something." The words pierced me, cold and merciless. I wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the shadows on the porch. "We will space out the requests," my father continued, calm, strategic. "Taylor cannot say no when you cry. It always works." "I do not like lying to her," my mother whispered. "It is not lying," Lucas answered sharply. "It is family. Her money is family money. She has no husband, no children. What else is she spending it on?" My apartment flashed across my mind. The one place I had fought for, furnished piece by piece, the only space that truly belonged to me. Now it sounded ridiculous in Lucas's mouth, like a toy I did not deserve. "She will be fine," my father said, final as a gavel. "Taylor always handles things. That is what she does." "Are you sure there is no other way?" my mother asked, almost pleading. "Unless you want me in federal prison for tax evasion and fraud, no," Lucas said. "My lawyer says if I can pay it back before they dig deeper, they will drop it to civil penalties." The word fraud rang in my head like a siren. Lucas, the golden child, the one they bragged about to neighbors and distant cousins, was not just failing. He was a criminal. And their plan, their solution, was me. I stepped back carefully, willing the wood to stay silent beneath my feet. My palms were slick with sweat. The casserole nearly slipped, heavy and absurd in my hands. Somehow I held it steady, though nothing inside me felt steady anymore. I descended the steps in silence, careful to avoid the third one, though it no longer mattered. When I reached the car, my legs shook so badly I had to lean against the door. I set the dish on the seat, slid behind the wheel, and closed my eyes. The porch light still glowed in the distance, pale yellow, warm to anyone else who passed by, but I knew now what lived behind it. I did not start the car. The key sat useless in the ignition while I stared at the glow of their windows. Shadows moved across the curtains, shapes of the people who had raised me, who had told me stories at bedtime, who had kissed scraped knees and bragged at graduations. For so long I had believed the house itself was built on love. Now it felt like a stage, and I had just seen the script. The casserole sat on my lap, warm against my legs, mocking me. I had carried it like an offering, believing it meant something. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and tried to breathe. My chest felt tight, like every inhale scraped against broken glass. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from my mother. "Where are you, sweetie? Dinner is ready." My thumb hovered. My first instinct was to answer honestly, to tell her I was sitting outside, that I had heard every word. But then I saw my father's face in my mind, calm and certain, planning how to bleed me dry. I saw Luca's laughing about casseroles, and I knew if I confronted them now they would deny it, twist it, make me feel small and ungrateful. So I typed instead, "Sorry, called into work. Emergency audit. Rain check." 3 dots blinked. Then her reply. "Oh no, we have something important to discuss." "Can it wait? The roof." She was going to say the roof, just like she had rehearsed inside. I felt something snap, quiet but final. "Sorry, Mom, boss says it is urgent. Love you." I tossed the phone aside, face down. The street hummed with insects, a lonely sound that felt truer than anything in that house. I turned the key. The engine came to life, low and steady. I drove, not toward my apartment, not toward anywhere in particular. I just needed distance. Gas stations blurred by, their neon signs buzzing against the night. Empty roads stretched out ahead, endless and cold. Motion became my only comfort. If I kept moving, maybe the truth would not catch me, but it followed anyway. It filled the car, louder than the hum of tires. Every memory replayed itself, cruel in its clarity. The year after college, when I handed them $40,000 from my signing bonus, thinking it was generosity. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee for months afterward, but I never complained. I thought sacrifice was what love required. The time Lucas's business collapsed and he came to me, eyes desperate, voice trembling. $20,000 just until he got back on his feet. He promised he would pay me back. He never did. I never asked. I thought that was what sisters did. Every anniversary dinner, every unexpected bill, every plea for help. I always opened my wallet, never questioning, never doubting. I believed it meant we were close, that we looked out for one another. But tonight had stripped away the illusion. They had not seen kindness. They had seen compliance. And compliance, once given, was expected forever. By the time I reached my apartment garage, my head ached from the weight of it. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the silence. The casserole was cold now, the smell sour in my nose. I left it on the seat. It did not feel like food anymore. It felt like evidence. I climbed the stairs with empty hands. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead. When I unlocked my door and stepped inside, the quiet pressed down heavy. I did not turn on the lights. I stood by the window, looking out over the dark street below, watching the trees shift in the wind. Something cracked open inside me. It was not anger, not yet. It was something slower, a heavy clarity that spread through my chest. For years I had built my life around being reliable, the daughter who showed up, the sister who saved the day. I believed love was measured in sacrifice. I thought casseroles and checks were the language of belonging. But now I understood. They had not been seeing me at all. They had only been seeing what I could provide. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. My reflection looked back at me, pale, hollow-eyed. I barely recognized her. My phone buzzed again on the counter. I did not pick it up. I knew it was them. I knew they were already rehearsing the stories, the requests, the tears. For the first time in my life, I did not want to answer. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and sat at the table. The apartment felt small and fragile, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall had been chosen by me. Not gifted, not handed down, not borrowed. Earned. I held on to that thought like a lifeline. This space was proof that I existed beyond their expectations. Proof that I could stand on my own. The night dragged on. I did not bother with dinner. The casserole still waited in the car, cold and useless. My stomach churned too much to eat anyway. I tried to sleep, but the voices replayed themselves endlessly. My father certain, Luca's mocking, my mother hesitant but complicit. They echoed in my skull until dawn. When the first light crept through the blinds, I sat up, exhausted but awake. Something in me had shifted during the night. I realized I did not have to wait for their next move. I could make my own. I walked to my desk, powered on my laptop, and began pulling up every account I had. Checking, savings, investments, even the old retirement fund from my first job. I moved money, shifted balances, transferred everything to banks my parents did not know. My fingers moved fast, fueled by a steady calm I had never felt before. I called customer service lines, set fraud alerts, froze every joint point of access I had ever shared. I changed passwords, added two-factor authentication, updated recovery questions. By the time the sun was fully up, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, notifications, all from my family. I ignored them. I looked around my apartment, the morning light cutting across the floor. It felt different now, stronger, safer. For the first time in years, I was not simply reacting. I was preparing, and I knew this was only the beginning. The morning after that Sunday felt like I had lived through an earthquake no one else had noticed. The world outside my window looked the same. The street below bustled with early commuters, coffee in hand, jackets pulled tight against the chill. Buses rumbled past. Dogs barked in the park across the way. Everything ordinary, everything steady. Yet inside me, nothing was steady anymore. I moved through my apartment as though I were a stranger visiting someone else's life. The sofa looked foreign. The framed photographs on the shelf seemed staged, smiling faces frozen in moments that no longer felt true. Even the kitchen smelled different, faint traces of herbs and garlic still clinging to the air from the casserole I had abandoned in the car. I pulled the dish inside eventually, though I could not bring myself to eat it. I set it on the counter, stared at it until my stomach turned, then shoved it into the refrigerator as though hiding the evidence might hide the betrayal too. Sleep had been nearly impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, heard their voices echoing through the dark. My father's certainty, my brother's laughter, my mother's brittle excuses. I kept asking myself if I had misunderstood, if exhaustion had twisted their words. But deep down, I knew I had heard exactly what they intended. And now the question was what to do with it. By mid-morning, my phone was filled with missed calls and unread messages. Mom, Dad, Lucas, all lined up like a chorus I no longer wanted to hear. I turned the phone over, screen down. I could not bear to read their words, could not risk falling into the trap of explanations and justifications. Instead, I made coffee. Strong, bitter, black. I sipped it slowly at the table, staring out the window at the shifting light. My mind wandered backward, as if dragging me through a lifetime of evidence I had ignored. I remembered being 12, saving my allowance to buy a necklace for my mother's birthday. She had hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack, tears in her eyes as she whispered, "You are my thoughtful girl." I had glowed for weeks, proud that I could bring joy with such a small sacrifice. At 16, I took a summer job bussing tables at a diner, sweaty and exhausted every night, just so I could contribute to the family vacation fund. I was too young to realize vacations were not my responsibility. I only knew that my parents praised me as the dependable one. In college, when financial aid fell short, I picked up extra shifts at the library and skipped nights out with friends. Later, when I landed my first real job, I handed over my signing bonus without hesitation, telling myself it was my turn to give back. I did not see the way relief replaced gratitude in their eyes. Memory after memory piled up, each one cutting deeper. The pattern had always been there. I had always been the resource, the safety net, the one who filled the gaps. They had taught me that love was measured by how much I could provide, and I had believed it completely. But now the illusion was gone. By noon, I found myself pacing the apartment, restless. My laptop still glowed on the desk from the night's work, accounts secure, passwords changed. That had been the practical step, the logical response. Yet my heart still throbbed with confusion. How do you reconcile decades of love with the realization that it might never have been love at all? I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. The silence pressed in heavy, broken only by the occasional vibration of my phone across the counter. I thought about answering once, maybe to hear what excuse they would try. But I knew better. Whatever words they used, the truth would not change. The truth was simple. They did not see me. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as a person. They saw a bank account. That afternoon, I tried to distract myself with work, pulling up spreadsheets and unfinished reports, but numbers blurred on the screen. Concentration slipped away like water through my fingers. Every time I tried to focus, my mind drifted back to the porch, to the moment my father said my name with such certainty, as though my life belonged to them. At some point, I realized I was crying. Quiet tears slipping down my cheeks, not from rage, not even from sadness, but from sheer exhaustion. Years of giving had hollowed me out, and now there was nothing left to give. When the tears stopped, what remained was a strange calm. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and opened a blank document on my computer. If I could not think clearly, maybe I could at least see clearly. I began to list everything. Every dollar I had ever handed over, every reason they had given, every excuse I had accepted, the signing bonus, the $20,000 for Lucas, the countless smaller transfers labeled roof repairs, medical bills, emergencies. I added dates, amounts, notes in the margins. Slowly, methodically, I built a record of my own history. The numbers shocked me, nearly $200,000 over the years. $200,000 I had convinced myself was love. I stared at the total, my hands trembling. That was not love. That was debt disguised as devotion. I closed the document and leaned back, letting the realization sink in. If I stayed on this path, if I kept handing over pieces of myself, there would be nothing left. The afternoon sun slipped lower, casting long shadows across the floor. I stood, stretched, and walked to the window. Below, life carried on. Children rode bikes, couples strolled hand in hand, neighbors watered their lawns. Normalcy looked beautiful and far away. I whispered to myself just to hear it out loud. I do not have to keep doing this. The words startled me, sharp in the quiet, but they felt true. For the first time, I understood I had a choice. That night, I did not cook. The refrigerator hummed softly, hiding the casserole dish like a guilty secret. I could not even look at it without feeling the sting of humiliation. Instead, I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring at the city lights blinking in the distance. The apartment felt heavier than usual, the silence pressing against me like a weight. My phone kept buzzing. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacking one after another. I turned it face down again and again, but it kept finding its way back into my thoughts. My mother's voice, trembling with practiced sorrow, was already in my head. My father's steady tone, Lucas's restless pleading. I knew exactly what they would say. They would twist the conversation I had overheard into something else. They would insist I misunderstood, that my exhaustion had played tricks on me, and I would doubt myself the way I always had. I could not let that happen. Not this time. So I let the phone buzz until the battery died. The silence afterward was almost a relief. I tried to sleep, but my body refused. I tossed beneath the covers, sheets tangling around me. Every time I closed my eyes, the images returned, sharp and unrelenting. My father's voice, calm as he mapped out how to bleed me dry. Lucas's laugh, cruel and careless. My mother's brittle sigh, caught between guilt and complicity. It played on a loop until I sat up again, drenched in sweat, my throat dry. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. The digital clock on the stove blinked past 3 a.m. The apartment was so still it almost hurt. For years I had believed silence was loneliness. Tonight it felt like protection. I thought of all the times I had traded away pieces of myself. How I had stayed late at the office to earn more, skipped vacations, postponed dreams, all so I could be the reliable daughter, the dependable sister. Every sacrifice I had made felt worthless now, as though I had been burning myself down to keep others warm without realizing they were throwing more wood onto the fire. Something inside me hardened. I walked back to the desk, opened my laptop again, and pulled up the document I had started earlier. The numbers stared back at me, stark and undeniable, nearly $200,000. I traced the total with my fingertip, feeling the weight of every choice that had led me here. I whispered the number out loud. 200,000. The sound of it made my chest tighten. That was the cost of believing that love meant giving without limit. That was the cost of being blind to the truth. I added one more line at the bottom of the document. Not money this time, just words, no more. When dawn broke, I felt hollow but resolute. The sunlight spilled across the floor, pale and new. I brewed fresh coffee, sat at the table, and opened my email. If I was going to change the course of my life, I needed help. I needed someone who could see clearly when I could not. My boss, Rachel Morgan, was the first name that came to mind. She was sharp, no nonsense, a woman who carried herself like someone who had walked through fire and learned how to keep moving. I typed quickly, subject lines simple and urgent, need advice, personal but may affect work. I stared at the words before pressing send. My stomach flipped. It felt dangerous to share any of this, to admit out loud that the foundation of my family had rotted away. but keeping it buried was more dangerous. If I stayed silent, they would find a way to pull me back under. I closed the laptop and sat back, exhausted. Outside, the city was waking up, voices drifting through open windows, footsteps echoing on the sidewalk. Life went on, oblivious to the collapse happening inside me. Later, when the phone was charged again, more messages flooded in. My mother's texts, increasingly urgent. My father's short, clipped demands. Lucas's barrage of missed calls. I skimmed a few, then forced myself to stop. They all said the same thing in different words. You owe us. You always have. I deleted them. My hand shook, but I did it anyway. That evening, I walked down to the corner store. The air was cool, the sky bruised with fading light. People moved past me in twos and threes, chatting, laughing, carrying bags of groceries. Normal lives. I wondered what it felt like to move through the world without the weight of betrayal pressing into your chest. I bought a notebook, plain and sturdy, and carried it home. At my desk, I opened the first page and wrote my name at the top. Beneath it, I began copying everything from the document on my computer. Dates, amounts, reasons, every sacrifice I had made. It felt different on paper, heavier somehow, as though ink could capture the truth more solidly than pixels ever could. Hours passed, page after page filling with evidence of my own naivety. My handwriting grew messier as the lists stretched longer, but I kept going until my hand ached. When I finally closed the notebook, I felt something close to a door, a chapter. I placed the notebook in the drawer of my desk, slid it shut, and locked it. The click was quiet, but it echoed in me. For the first time since that night on the porch, I felt a fragile sense of control. The apartment was still small, still quiet, still a little lonely. But it was mine. And as I climbed into bed, exhaustion pulling me under, I held onto one simple truth. I did not have to keep living as the person they thought I was. The following morning began not with dread, but with a strange steadiness. My body still carried the ache of sleepless nights, but my mind felt sharper, as if some unseen fog had burned away overnight. The sun streamed weakly through the blinds, cutting long lines across the floor of my apartment, and I watched the light crawl forward while sipping black coffee that tasted more bitter than usual. The calls and texts had started again, relentless as ever, but I ignored them. Their words were no longer invitations, but weapons, sharpened by guilt and expectation. I left the phone face down on the counter, its constant buzzing like the hum of an angry insect I refused to swat. Instead, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop once more. The document with all the transfers, the history of my obedience, blinked back at me. $200,000 over years of sacrifice. Seeing the number still made my chest tight, but now it also hardened my resolve. I was done being their solution. One by one, I opened every account linked to my name. Checking, savings, investments. The old 401k from my first job that I had almost forgotten about. I transferred balances into new accounts at banks they did not know existed. I called each customer service line, setting fraud alerts, requesting new security measures, adding extra authentication layers. I changed every password, choosing combinations no one else could guess, tying them to memories only I knew. Hours passed like this, the steady rhythm of control. Each click of a button felt like a small reclamation, each phone call a barrier built between myself and the people who had once felt like home. By midday, my accounts were fortified, my finances sealed behind walls no one else could breach. My phone buzzed constantly as I worked, but I refused to answer. They could sense the shift, I knew. They could feel me slipping from their grasp. When at last I leaned back in my chair, muscles stiff from tension, I realized I had not eaten all day. My stomach grumbled, but food seemed unimportant. What mattered was the notebook in my drawer, the spreadsheet glowing on my screen, the sense that I was no longer defenseless. For years, I had believed defending myself meant betraying them. Now I understood it meant surviving. But survival required more than secure accounts. It required guidance. I could not navigate this alone. Rachel Morgan came to mind again, my boss. She was not just sharp, she was steel-wrapped in elegance. A woman who had built her career brick by brick, no shortcuts, no apologies. She had seen enough of life to recognize lies before they left someone's lips. I trusted her in a way I rarely trusted anyone. I drafted an email, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I searched for the right words. Finally, I kept it simple. Rachel, I need your advice. It is personal, but it may affect my work. Could we talk today if you have time? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Minutes later, her assistant replied with a slot in the afternoon. My chest tightened at the thought of speaking the truth out loud, but I knew it had to be done. The hours until that meeting stretched long. I tried to distract myself with routine tasks, tidying the apartment, folding laundry, rearranging books on the shelf. But my thoughts kept circling back to the porch, to the voices that had shattered everything. I would hear them forever, I realized. They were stitched into me now. But maybe if I said the words aloud, if I let someone else witness them, they might lose some of their power. By the time I left for the office, clouds had gathered over the city, heavy and gray. The air felt thick, storm pressing down. I carried my notebook in my bag, pages filled with years of evidence as though it were armor. The elevator ride up to Rachel's floor felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked pale, tired, but steadier than I expected. When the doors opened, her assistant gestured me toward the office. Rachel did not smile when I entered. She rarely did. Instead, she gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Sit, tell me what is going on." Her voice was calm, clipped, leaving no room for small talk. It steadied me. I set my notebook on the desk and opened it to the first page. My handwriting looked jagged, rushed, but clear enough. I took a deep breath and began. I overheard my family planning to take money from me. Not asking, not requesting, but planning. My brother is in trouble with the law, fraud, tax evasion. They want me to cover it to save him, and I realized it is not the first time. It has never been about love, it has always been about money. Rachel leaned back, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I kept talking. The words tumbled out faster than I intended, spilling the whole story. The promotion, the sacrifices, the laughter I had overheard. My mother's half-hearted protests. My father's certainty. When at last I stopped, the silence in the room felt sharp. Rachel studied me, her eyes dark. "First," she said finally, "you are handling this better than most. Second, you need a lawyer. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they may try to twist it into something that makes you look guilty. Third, you need to document everything. Every dollar, every ask, every detail. A record strong enough to stand in court if it comes to that." I slid the notebook across the desk. She flipped through the pages, eyebrows lifting slightly as she skimmed the numbers. "This is a start," she said. "Keep going, dates, amounts, reasons, do not leave anything vague. If they try to come after you, you need to be ready." She looked up at me then, her gaze softer. "And one more thing, we have an opening in our San Francisco office. Same title, better pay. More importantly, a coast between you and this chaos. I think you should consider it." The words landed heavy. San Francisco. A new city, a new life, distance, freedom. I did not answer right away. My throat felt tight, but somewhere deep inside something shifted, a door cracking open. I left Rachel's office with the notebook clutched tightly against my chest as if it were both shield and compass. The hallway outside buzzed faintly with phones ringing, conversations drifting, footsteps echoing. Ordinary sounds of ordinary workdays. But for me, nothing about the day felt ordinary. Something had changed. I had spoken the truth out loud, and in doing so I had made it real. In the elevator, I caught my reflection again. Pale, tired, but steadier than before. My shoulders did not slump the way they usually did when I carried the invisible weight of everyone else's needs. For once, I carried only mine. Back at my desk, I opened the notebook again, added the details Rachel had asked for. Every time I pressed pen to paper, I felt lighter, as though naming the debts stripped them of their power. I listed the exact date of my first signing bonus, the day I handed it over like a gift. I wrote about the $20,000 for Lucas's failed venture, the countless smaller requests that had slipped in between. I even recorded the times I had covered dinners, bills, vacations. Line by line, the story of my compliance unfolded in black ink. The total grew staggering, but instead of despair, I felt determination. This was no longer a story of generosity. It was evidence. By late afternoon, my phone finally broke through my silence. I had left it face down all day, ignoring the vibrations, but now it began ringing with a persistence that made my stomach twist. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. Lucas, I should have ignored it, I knew that, but curiosity or maybe some remnant of old loyalty made me swipe to answer. "Taylor, where the hell have you been?" His voice was sharp, impatient. "At work," I said flatly. "At the job you think prints money." He paused. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I am busy. What do you want?" He lowered his tone, trying to sound reasonable. "We need to talk as a family. Dinner tomorrow, everyone together, we will explain." "I cannot," I said. "I have plans." "More important than family?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "The kind of plans that do not involve scheming to steal 300 grand. Silence spread across the line, heavy, jagged. Then he said slowly, "You were listening." "I was bringing dinner," I replied. "Remember that, the family dinner you all laughed about, the ritual I still foolishly believed in. Taylor, it is not what you think. It is exactly what I think. You planned it. You told them to cry if they had to. You called me naive. He sighed, the sound ragged. I am in trouble. I could go to prison. You should have thought about that before you committed fraud. You are seriously going to let me go down over money you can afford? His voice cracked with disbelief. I closed my eyes, fighting back the heat in my chest. I could not afford the 40 grand I gave Mom and Dad. I could not afford the 20 I gave you. I could not afford any of it, but I gave it because I thought that is what family meant. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt between us. For a moment, I thought he might say something honest. Instead, he muttered, I am begging you, Taylor. Then beg someone else, I said, and I hung up. My hands shook, but the air around me felt clearer. The old version of me would have wavered, would have opened my wallet at the sound of desperation. But that version was gone. The texts began immediately, from Lucas, from my mother, from my father. I refused to read them. I turned the phone off, dropped it in a drawer, and locked it. That night, exhaustion weighed heavy, but sleep came easier than before. Not peaceful, but solid enough to hold me through the dark hours. The next morning, I woke with a new kind of clarity. I moved through my apartment with purpose. Coffee, notebook, laptop, my small rituals of survival. By mid-morning, a knock sounded at the lobby downstairs. Security called up, telling me a visitor had pushed past the desk. My stomach dropped when I heard the name. My mother. I hesitated, but something in me refused to hide. I walked down to the lobby, heels clicking against the marble floor. She was waiting by the elevators, hair undone, eyes red from crying. Taylor, please, she said the moment she saw me. Just talk to me. We are talking, I answered evenly. Right here, her face crumpled. Not here, not in front of everyone. Please, can we go somewhere private? No, I said, her hands twisted together. Lucas is in trouble. I know, I said. Fraud, tax evasion, I heard it all. He told me he made mistakes, but he is your brother. No, I corrected. He is your son, you help him. We do not have the money, you know that. Then maybe he should not have committed a felony. Her voice cracked, fragile as glass. How can you be so cold? This is not like you. You are right, I said softly. The old me would have written the check already. The old me thought love meant sacrifice. The old me believed you when you said family helps family. She looked up at me, eyes wide, confused. What are you saying? I am saying the old me died on your porch. She flinched as if I had struck her. Tears welled fresh in her eyes. We were desperate. No, I said, stepping back. You were greedy. There is a difference. She reached for me, but I pulled away. Around us, people walked past, eyes flicking curiously at the scene unfolding. I stood tall in my navy blazer, while my mother cried like a child beneath the golden letters of my firm's name on the wall. I did not move until she turned away, shoulders hunched, retreating through the lobby doors. I watched her go, my heart heavy but unbroken. When the glass doors shut behind her, I exhaled slowly. The world felt quieter. For the first time, I realized what strength tasted like. The week dragged on like a storm that refused to pass. My phone remained locked away in the desk drawer, vibrating occasionally as though the voices of my family were trapped inside, rattling against the wood. Each time it buzzed, my chest tightened, but I refused to open it. Silence had become my only defense. At work, I kept my head down, burying myself in reports and numbers. It was easier to focus on columns and formulas than on the chaos outside. Yet even as I moved through spreadsheets, a part of me knew this wall of silence would not hold forever. They would not simply give up. They never had. That thought led me back to Rachel. Our conversation replayed in my head, her calm insistence that I needed a lawyer, a record, a plan. She had seen straight through the fog and pointed me toward the truth. She had even offered a way out, a fresh start across the country. San Francisco. The word lingered like a whisper at the edge of my thoughts. I had never considered leaving the city, never considered leaving them. But maybe leaving was the only path left. One evening, long after the office had emptied, I found myself lingering outside Rachel's door again. The light inside was still on, glowing faintly against the frosted glass. I hesitated, then knocked. Come in, her voice called. She looked up from her desk as I entered, her sharp eyes softening slightly. Taylor, sit. I closed the door behind me and sat, notebook balanced on my lap. I added more details, I said, sliding it across the desk. She flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. Good, this is thorough. Keep copies. Scan them, do not keep everything in one place. I already did, I admitted. 2 backups, 1 cloud, 1 drive. Smart, she said. Then she leaned back, studying me. Me, how you are holding up. I hesitated. The truth was messy. I felt hollow one moment and furious the next. I felt betrayed and foolish, strong and broken all at once. But words failed, so I settled on, I am still standing. Rachel gave a small nod. That is more than some could say. For a moment, silence stretched between us, filled only by the hum of the office lights. Then she spoke again, her tone quieter. You know, I have seen this before, not the same details, but the same pattern. Families who drain the strongest one among them because she always says yes. It is easier to keep taking from the person who never refuses, until one day she finally does. Her words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. And what happens then? Sometimes they wake up. Sometimes they collapse without her. Either way, she survives. I looked down at my hands. They trembled slightly, but I clenched them together until they stilled. Rachel leaned forward. Do not let guilt drag you back. They will try. They will twist every word, every memory. They will cry, accuse, even threaten, but none of that changes what is true. I nodded, though the weight of her words pressed heavily against me. Have you thought about San Francisco? She asked after a pause. I have, I admitted. It feels impossible, but maybe it is the only way. It is not impossible, she said firmly. It is a choice, a hard one but a choice, and you are allowed to make it. Her certainty steadied me, the way it always did. For a moment I imagined a different life, mornings with ocean fog rolling in, evenings spent with colleagues who valued me for my mind, not my wallet. A life where Sunday dinners did not leave me hollow. I left her office with my chest tight but my head a little clearer. The city outside smelled of rain, the streets glistening under street lamps. I walked slowly, umbrella tucked under my arm, letting the cool air wash over me. Back in my apartment, I pulled the casserole dish from the refrigerator. The food inside had spoiled, the cream curdled, the herbs limp. I stared at it for a long moment, then carried it to the trash. As it landed with a dull thud, I felt a strange relief. It was just food, just glass and metal. But it had carried all my illusions, and letting it go felt like shedding a skin. Later that night, I opened the notebook again. I added one more entry, not about money this time, but about truth. Line by line, I wrote, I am not their solution. I am not their bank. I am not their sacrifice. When I closed the notebook, my hand ached from pressing the pen too hard. But for the first time in days, I slept without waking every hour. The next day, I woke earlier than usual. The city was still dim, streetlights humming faintly against the pale hint of dawn. I brewed coffee and sat at the table with my notebook open, staring at the words I had written the night before. I am not their solution. I am not their bank. I am not their sacrifice. I traced the lines with my finger as though engraving them deeper into myself. Every time doubt threatened to creep back, I repeated them silently. At the office, the hours blurred. I buried myself in spreadsheets, checked calculations twice, answered emails with mechanical precision. But under the rhythm of routine, my thoughts pulsed with unease. It was only a matter of time before they made another move. By mid-afternoon, Rachel called me into her office again. Her tone was brisk, but there was a glimmer of concern in her eyes. Taylor, sit, there is something we need to discuss. I obeyed, notebook in hand. She tapped a folder on her desk. I spoke with a lawyer I trust. Her name is Rachel Lee. She is efficient, direct, no nonsense. If things escalate, and they likely will, you will need her. I nodded, my chest tightening at the certainty in her voice. You think they will escalate? I know they will, she said simply. Desperate people do not back down when their source of rescue cuts the cord. They thrash, they push harder. Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but I knew she was right. Rachel leaned back, folding her hands. This is not just about money for them. It is about control. They are used to you saying yes. When you say no, you shatter the system they have relied on for years. They will not accept it easily. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What do? You prepare, you document. And you remind yourself every day that saying no is not cruelty. It is survival. I nodded again, forcing my shoulders to stay square. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp. And you think about San Francisco. More than think, you consider it a lifeline. The word lifeline echoed in my mind long after I left her office. That night, back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the dim light of the living room. The notebook lay open on the table, pages filled with the history of my giving. I added another memory, one I had not thought about in years. When I was 19, Lucas had asked me to co-sign a loan for a car. I had hesitated, but my parents convinced me it was the right thing to do. He is your brother, they said. Family helps family. I signed. Months later, when he missed payments, it was my credit that took the hit. I had buried the resentment, told myself it was worth it. Writing it down now made my hand shake. It was then that the doorbell rang. The sound startled me, sharp against the quiet. My stomach clenched as I approached the door, heart pounding. I peered through the peephole, my mother. She stood in the hallway, shoulders hunched, eyes puffy from crying. I froze, every muscle taut. Part of me wanted to open the door, to fall back into the role I had always played. But Rachel's words echoed in my mind. They will twist every memory. They will push harder. I stepped back from the door, silent. After a few minutes, she knocked softly. "Taylor, it is me. Please, just talk to me." Her voice cracked, thin and desperate. For a moment, I almost caved. But then I remembered her words from that night, the way she had said she did not like lying but had still agreed to do it. I stayed silent. Eventually, her footsteps faded down the hall. The silence that followed was suffocating, but I did not move. I stood in the dark, hand pressed to my chest, until my heartbeat slowed. Later, I wrote in the notebook again. Tonight, I chose silence over surrender. The pages were filling quickly, each line a record of both past mistakes and new strength. It was no longer just evidence. It was becoming a map out of the life I had been trapped in. When I finally went to bed, exhaustion swept over me. But beneath the fatigue was a quiet determination. Rachel was right. This would escalate. They would not stop. But I would not break. By the time the weekend arrived, I had begun to expect the silence. No more knocks at the door. No more phone calls sneaking past the drawer. It should have felt like relief, but instead it was an uneasy quiet, the kind that made me wonder what they were planning behind the curtain. On Saturday morning, I finally charged my phone, curiosity gnawing at me despite my better judgment. When the screen lit up, the messages poured in. Missed calls stacked into dozens. Texts scrolled down like an endless scroll of desperation. My mother's tone shifting from pleading to sharp. My father's clipped sentences demanding to talk. Lucas's messages the most relentless, swinging wildly between apology and accusation. I skimmed a few, then locked the phone again. Their words were traps, carefully baited with guilt. I would not step into them. By afternoon, the phone rang again. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. Lucas. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside me wanted to hear how far he would go. My thumb hesitated, then slid across the screen. "Taylor," his voice burst out immediately, fast and breathless. "Thank God, you are finally answering." I said nothing, waiting. "You do not understand what is happening," he continued. "This is bigger than me. If I do not cover this, it could ruin all of us. You think it is just me, but if they dig deeper, Dad could get pulled in too." The words hit me like a cold slap. My chest tightened. "Are you saying Dad is involved?" He hesitated too long. "Not directly. But he signed some things, all right? He trusted me. If this blows up, it is not just me who goes down." For a moment, I could not breathe. Then I said carefully, "So you want me to save both of you?" "You are twisting it," he snapped. "I am asking you to protect the family. That is what you always do. You are the responsible one. You are the dependable one." The words echoed the ones my mother had said my whole life. Responsible, dependable, always, but they did not feel like praise anymore. They felt like chains. "I am not doing it," I said, my voice low but steady. Silence stretched across the line. Then he laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think you are better than us now? You think just because you make good money you can look down on your own family?" My hand shook as I held the phone. "I do not look down on you. I just refuse to be destroyed with you." "You are heartless," he spat. "After everything we have been through, you would abandon us now?" "After everything I have given," I corrected. "After every sacrifice, every dollar, every time I chose you over myself. And you laughed about it. You called me naive. You told them to fake tears so I would give more. Do not talk to me about heartless." His breath hissed across the line, sharp with anger. "If you let me go down for this, I will never forgive you." I closed my eyes. "Then never forgive me." And I hung up. My body shook, but my chest felt strangely light. For the first time, I had not only said no, I had said it with finality. The quiet after the call was deafening. I sat on the couch, staring at my hands, wondering how something so small could feel like a war. That night, I wrote another entry in the notebook. "Lucas said I am heartless, but heartless is refusing to sacrifice myself anymore." I slept fitfully, dreams filled with echoes of his voice. But even in the dreams, I heard my own words louder. "Never forgive me." Sunday came, the day I had once centered my life around. For 12 years, I had never missed a dinner. Now I sat alone in my apartment, no casserole in the oven, no drive down Oakwood Drive. The absence should have hurt, but instead it felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to exist outside of obligation. Still, part of me wondered what they were saying around the table without me. Were they plotting? Were they painting me as the villain? I imagined Lucas raging, my father strategizing, my mother wringing her hands. And me, the ghost of the dependable daughter, already fading from their picture. That evening, as the sky turned orange, there was a knock at my door. My heart leapt into my throat. Slowly, I approached, peering through the peephole. My mother again. Her face was weary, her eyes red. She clutched her purse tightly against her side, as though holding herself together. I hesitated, but opened the door this time. She stepped in quickly, almost desperately. Taylor, please, just listen. I folded my arms, leaning against the counter. I am listening. Tears welled immediately. Lucas is not a bad person. He just made mistakes. We all make mistakes. Fraud is not a mistake, I said quietly. Tax evasion is not a mistake. Her voice cracked. He is your brother. And I am your daughter, I replied. Why is his survival worth more than mine? She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. Because he cannot handle it. You can. You are strong, Taylor. You always have been. That is why we lean on you. The words, meant as comfort, landed like knives. Because I was strong, they had chosen to use me. Because I could handle it, they had decided I should. I shook my head. Strength does not mean endless sacrifice. Her hands trembled. We are desperate. No, I said firmly. You are greedy. She gasped, covering her mouth as if I had cursed. For a moment, I almost wavered. Almost. But then Rachel's voice echoed in my memory. Do not let guilt drag you back. I stepped toward the door and opened it. I think you should go, she sobbed, shaking her head. Taylor, please, if you walk away now, he could go to prison. That is his path, I said softly. Not mine. She looked at me one last time, eyes filled with disbelief, then stepped into the hallway. Her footsteps echoed as she walked away. When the door shut, I pressed my forehead to the wood, my chest heaving. My body ached with the effort of standing firm. But I had stood. The hours after my mother left felt like a hollow echo. I wandered the apartment aimlessly, picking up objects only to set them down again, unable to rest. Every corner seemed to carry her voice, her tears, the way she had clutched her purse like a lifeline. I hated that it still pierced me, that even after everything I had heard, part of me wanted to cradle her, to soothe her. But that part was shrinking, little by little, replaced by something steadier. By Monday morning, the office lobby felt like a sanctuary. I wore my navy blazer, heels clicking against the marble, my posture straighter than usual. I passed colleagues who smiled politely, unaware that my entire world was shifting beneath the surface. In a strange way, the normalcy of work kept me upright. Spreadsheets did not betray me. Deadlines did not twist my love into debt. Numbers stayed loyal. But midweek, the fragile balance broke again. I was packing my laptop into my bag when the receptionist called. Her voice crackled through the phone at my desk. Taylor, there is someone here from legal. He says he needs to deliver documents to you personally. My pulse spiked. Send him up. Minutes later, a manila envelope was placed in my hands. No explanations, no apologies, just a signature scribbled on a clipboard, and then he was gone. I carried the envelope back to my desk and sat down slowly. My hands trembled as I tore the flap open. Inside, a formal complaint. My parents were suing me. I read the words 3 times, my vision blurring with disbelief. They claimed the money I had given over the years had been loans. That I was now demanding repayment and had caused them emotional distress and financial instability by cutting off contact. For a moment, I laughed, a hollow sound, almost hysterical. It was so absurd, so surreal that laughter felt like the only possible response. But when the laughter faded, the weight settled in. This was not just guilt anymore. It was war. I grabbed my notebook, the one filled with years of evidence, and scanned the pages quickly. Every line, every date, every note in the margin was proof of the truth. They had never been loans, they had been gifts. Sacrifices, pieces of myself I had given freely, believing it was love. I pulled out the business card Rachel had slipped me, the lawyer's name scrawled in neat ink. Rachel Lee, efficient, direct. That night I called her. My voice trembled as I explained, reading directly from the complaint. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. They have no case, she said finally. Her tone was calm, clipped. No contracts, no documentation, nothing to prove these were loans. This is textbook harassment. Can we counter? I asked, my throat tight. Yes, you could sue for damages, emotional distress, defamation. We would win. I sat in silence, the thought twisting inside me. I could fight fire with fire. I could drag them into court and watch them crumble under their own lies. But the idea of clawing at them for money, of binding myself to them through more litigation, made my stomach turn. No, I said finally. I do not want their money, I just want them gone. There was another pause, then Rachel's voice softened. Understood, we will respond accordingly. Leave the rest to me. When I hung up, I closed the folder, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, and locked it. The click felt like sealing a coffin. That weekend, I began packing. Not just for a potential move, but for a life without them. I filled boxes with books, clothes, small keepsakes. Some I wrapped carefully, others I left behind. Framed photos from holidays went into the trash. Cookbooks with my mother's handwriting in the margins stayed on the shelf. I touched them once, then turned away. Each box sealed was a step closer to freedom. A step closer to San Francisco, to a new coast, to a new life. On Sunday morning, the phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Taylor? Lucas's voice cracked and raw. I closed my eyes. What do you want? You are really going to let me go to prison? His tone was desperate, stripped of bravado. I am not letting you do anything, I said. You are going to prison because you committed crimes. I could lose everything, he whispered. I already have, I said. My family, my trust, my belief that you cared about me as a person. Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. I was scared, he said finally. I did not know what else to do. You planned it, I snapped. You laughed about it, you told them how to trick me, you did not think about me at all. His breath caught. Taylor, please, I am begging you. I held the phone tightly, my knuckles white. I already told you, beg someone else, I am done. And I hung up. This time I did not cry, I did not tremble. I turned the phone off, dropped it into the drawer beside the legal complaint, and closed it with finality. The silence that followed was not empty, it was freedom. The days that followed felt strangely calm, as if I had stepped into the eye of a storm. Work filled my hours, packing filled my evenings, and silence filled the spaces in between. I convinced myself that maybe it was over. Maybe the lawsuit was just a scare tactic, a last-ditch attempt to rattle me, and now they were licking their wounds. But deep down, I knew better. On Friday afternoon, Rachel Lee called. Her voice was steady, but the words sharpened like glass. Taylor, the other side, has filed an amendment. They are not just claiming the money was loans anymore. They are claiming you have defrauded them. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I defrauded them? Yes, she said calmly. They allege you promised repayment of those so-called loans, then turned around and cut them off, causing emotional and financial damage. I sat frozen at my desk, the world tilting. My parents, my own parents, they were not just begging anymore. They were painting me as a thief. Rachel's voice cut through the haze. It is nonsense, Taylor, completely unsupported. They have no contracts, no written agreements, nothing. But you need to understand what this means. They are escalating. They are not backing down. I pressed my hand to my forehead, fighting the rising wave of nausea. So what do? We respond as before, she said. We dismantle every claim piece by piece, and if necessary, we countersue. But you need to prepare yourself emotionally. They are willing to destroy your reputation to save themselves. Her words landed like stones in my chest. I had known they were desperate. I had known they were willing to drain me, but I had not believed they would go this far, not until now. That night, I sat among the half-packed boxes in my apartment, staring at the folded clothes, the taped cartons, the life I was about to leave behind. My chest ached with betrayal, sharper than before. This was not just about money anymore. This was about erasing me, rewriting me as the villain in their story. I thought back to every Sunday dinner, every laugh around the table, every time my mother kissed my cheek, every time my father clapped me on the shoulder, every time Lucas teased me like a brother should. Were all those moments lies too, or had they simply decided that my love was expendable the moment it stopped being useful? I poured myself a glass of water, my hand shaking so badly I nearly spilled it. I did not cry. The tears had dried up days ago. What replaced them now was steel. If they wanted a war, I would not give them my silence anymore. The next morning, I met with Rachel Lee in her office downtown. She was brisk, efficient, already holding a stack of papers. We will file a motion to dismiss. Their claims are baseless, but I want you to understand they may try to drag this out. They may use every tactic to drain your energy. I can handle it, I said, though my voice cracked slightly. She studied me, her eyes narrowing. You should not have to, but you will. I handed her the notebook, the record of every dollar, every request, every manipulation. She flipped through it quickly, nodding. This is gold. Keep adding to it. It will shut down their narrative completely. Leaving her office, I felt lighter. Not because the problem was solved, but because I was not standing alone anymore. Still, the weight of the betrayal pressed against me. It clung to me even as I packed another box that night, even as I folded clothes into neat stacks, even as I set aside the few items that mattered most. The legal fight was beginning, but the personal war was already lost. My family had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I was no longer their daughter, their sister. I was their enemy. The following week unfolded like a nightmare staged in slow motion. Rachel Lee filed the motion to dismiss, her confidence unwavering, but my parents and Lucas did not retreat. Instead, they doubled down. Letters arrived almost daily, legal jargon laced with venom, each one accusing me of betrayal, of cruelty, of tearing apart the very fabric of our family. Reading them felt like swallowing poison. My name was twisted into something ugly on paper, a caricature of greed. They painted me as a daughter who had tricked her parents into giving her money, who had manipulated them emotionally, who had abandoned them in their time of need. And they signed their names at the bottom. My mother's neat cursive, my father's blocky scrawl. I stared at those signatures, remembering how many times those same hands had patted my back, held mine across crowded streets, written birthday cards filled with love. Now they inked accusations meant to destroy me. At night, I found myself pacing the apartment, unable to sleep. The packed boxes became silent witnesses, stacked against the walls, waiting for a future that still felt fragile. Every creak of the building made me startle, every ring of the phone made my stomach clench. Then came the moment I had feared most. On Wednesday afternoon, as I left the office, I spotted them, my parents, standing outside the glass doors, their faces tight, pale with strain. My mother's eyes were swollen, my father's jaw set like stone. For a moment I froze, the city noise muffled as though I were underwater. "Taylor," my mother called, her voice breaking, "please just talk to us." I wanted to run. I wanted to vanish into the crowd, but something stronger rooted me in place. Slowly I approached. "We are not doing this here," I said, my voice flat. "Then where?" my father demanded. "You are tearing this family apart." I let out a hollow laugh. "I am tearing it apart." "You sued me. You left us no choice," he shot back. "You abandoned us." "No," I said. "I saved myself." My mother reached out, tears spilling again. "You do not understand. Lucas could go to prison. He needs you." "He made his choices," I said firmly. "And you made yours when you decided to back him instead of me." Her hand hovered in the air, trembling. "We were desperate." "You were dishonest," I corrected. "You signed those papers. You swore lies under oath." The words hung between us, sharp and final. For a moment their faces crumbled, the mask slipping. But then my father straightened, his voice cold. "If you walk away now, Taylor, you are no longer part of this family." The words should have gutted me. For years, the thought of exile from them had been unthinkable. But as I stood there, heart pounding, I realized something. They had already exiled me. The moment they chose to drag me into court, they had cut the last thread. "I know," I said quietly. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the swirl of the crowd, their figures shrinking in the reflection of the glass doors. My legs trembled, but I did not look back. That night, I opened the notebook again and wrote until my hand cramped. Not numbers this time, not dates, just truths I needed to see in ink. They will not stop. They will try to break me, but I am not theirs to break. When I closed the notebook, I felt a strange calm. The storm was raging louder than ever, but inside, a new kind of strength was taking root. Weeks later, the case came before the judge. Rachel Lee stood by my side, her voice steady, slicing through every accusation with the precision of a blade. She held up my notebook, the meticulous record of every transfer, every request. She dismantled their narrative until there was nothing left but dust. The judge dismissed the case in minutes. Outside the courtroom, Lucas glared at me, his eyes burning with hatred. My parents looked smaller than I had ever seen them, their shoulders hunched, their faces lined with exhaustion. For a flicker of a moment, I almost felt pity. But then I remembered the envelope in my hands, the accusations signed in their names, and the pity dissolved. The war they had chosen to wage was over. And though I carried scars, I was still standing. When I returned home that night, I walked through the half-empty apartment, the taped boxes waiting. The decision that had once felt impossible now felt inevitable. I picked up my phone, opened the email from Rachel Morgan, and typed a simple reply. "I will take the San Francisco position." Then I hit send. The future had never looked so uncertain. But it was mine. "I will take the San Francisco position." Then I hit send. The future had never looked so uncertain. But it was mine. I kept staring at the screen long after the email disappeared from my outbox. No confetti animation. No triumphant music, just silence and the faint hum of my laptop fan. It felt strange how a decision that heavy could fit inside a single sentence. It did not feel like winning. It felt like finally breathing without asking permission. I closed the lid and leaned back in my chair. My apartment was half-packed already. Boxes lined the hallway like quiet witnesses. Some were marked kitchen, some books, some fragile. None were labeled memories, but that was where most of the weight lived. I had not decided whether to take the casserole dish. It still sat on the counter, scrubbed clean, but stained with a kind of grief I could not wash away. Rachel had replied to my email almost immediately. "Proud of you. Call me when you land." The closest thing to maternal warmth I had felt in weeks came from a woman who was technically still my boss. I let that sink in without resisting it. Maybe family was not something you were born into. Maybe it was something you chose on purpose. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Not because I had to, but because my mind would not let me rest. Moving day was not for another 3 days, but my body behaved as if I had already stepped out of the city. I brewed coffee and drank it standing by the window. The street below was quiet. A delivery truck rumbled past and disappeared. For a brief second, I imagined what it would feel like to climb into the back of it and vanish without paperwork or forwarding addresses. My phone buzzed on the counter. I let it ring. I did not have to look to know the name on the screen. They had gone silent after the verdict, but silence from them was never peace. It was strategy. They were waiting for the right angle, waiting for me to waver, waiting for guilt to crawl back in. But guilt was no longer my native language. I walked away from the phone and opened the closet. My clothes hung in neat rows, sorted by fabric and shade like they always had been. Control had been my shield for years. If I kept everything in line, maybe the chaos would not reach me. Now I slid hangers into garment bags without ceremony. These were not trophies. They were tools. They would come with me. I packed quietly for hours, stopping only when the sun finally stretched high enough to warm the living room floor. I sat for a moment in that patch of light and let it cover my hands. It felt like a blessing. Or maybe just proof that warmth could come from somewhere other than other people. By afternoon, I called the leasing office in San Francisco. A furnished one-bedroom overlooking the bay, not luxurious but high enough that I could see water instead of faces. I signed the documents digitally and wired the deposit. Another signature, another irreversible step. I waited for regret to arrive. It did not. The message from my mother came that evening. I heard you are leaving. Please do not go like this. We are still your family. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a plea wrapped in entitlement. I read it 3 times without reacting. Then I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. I pulled out a saucepan and filled it with water. When it boiled, I added pasta. No sauce, just plain noodles and salt. Simple. Sustaining. Mine, I ate standing up. No phone, no distractions. Chewing slowly like I was learning the language of hunger again. Hunger that belonged only to me. When the bowl was empty, I washed it and set it carefully on the rack. A small act of closure. Later that night, I sat on the floor between packed boxes and opened my journal. I had ignored it for weeks, but tonight the page did not scare me. I wrote only one sentence. I choose myself, not as a declaration, not as revenge, as a quiet fact. Sleep came easier after that. Morning would bring logistics. Movers, trash bags, final walkthrough, but tonight there was only stillness. And for the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was abandoning something. I felt like I was finally stepping towards someone I had misplaced, someone waiting for me on a different coast, someone who looked like me but lighter. 3 days from now, I would board a plane, but in a way I had already left. The flight was early, the kind of hour that felt removed from real life. The airport was half asleep when I rolled my suitcase across the polished floor. No dramatic farewell. No one chasing me through the terminal begging me to stay, just the soft buzz of departure screens and the steady pull of forward motion. I found my seat by the window and rested my forehead against the glass as the plane taxied down the runway. The city below me looked smaller than I expected. Streets that once felt endless now folded into a neat patchwork of lights. I watched them vanish as the aircraft lifted. I did not wave goodbye. Some chapters closed better without ceremony. San Francisco greeted me with sharp sunlight and a wind that tasted like salt and possibility. My cab driver talked about the rising rents and the best places to get sourdough. I answered with polite hums, saving my words for later. My new building stood on a hill, pale blue with balconies facing the water. It was quieter than I expected, peaceful in a way that did not demand anything from me. The leasing agent handed me the key and left with a smile that did not pry. I stepped into the apartment and closed the door behind me. The space echoed with emptiness but not loneliness. Wide windows stretched across the living room, framing the bay like a painting. Water shimmered under the afternoon sun, moving steadily, certain of its direction even when I was not. I placed my suitcase in the corner and stood barefoot on the wooden floor. No furniture yet, no history, just air and light and room to grow into. I walked to the window and pressed my palm against the glass. The wind outside rattled but could not shake me. Unpacking took little time, clothes in drawers, toiletries lined neatly on the bathroom shelf, laptop on the desk facing the view. When everything was in place, I sat cross-legged on the floor and let the stillness settle around me. I expected to feel strange, displaced. Instead, I felt like a page finally cleared of scribbles. That evening, I walked to a nearby grocery store and bought only what I needed. eggs, bread, fresh herbs, olive oil. I did not fill the cart out of habit or fear of scarcity. I chose carefully, intentionally. Cooking had once been an offering to others. Now it was communion with myself. Back home, I cracked 2 eggs into a bowl and whisked them slowly. The sound was soft, meditative. I poured them into a pan and watched as they formed lazy swirls of gold. No rush, no deadline, just warmth spreading across metal. I slid the omelet onto a plate and carried it to the window. I ate while watching the water shift colors with the sinking sun. Each bite tasted like permission. The air smelled faintly of the ocean. The breeze slipped through the cracked window and brushed my skin like a greeting. My phone buzzed once on the counter. I did not check it. Whoever it was could wait. I had spent years answering calls before they even finished ringing. Tonight belonged to silence. When the plate was empty, I washed it and set it on the rack. It clinked softly against the porcelain. A small sound. A new rhythm. I moved to the balcony after sunset. The sky had deepened to cobalt. Boats drifted in the distance, their lights flickering like quiet intentions. I wrapped my arms around myself and breathed in the cool air. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel responsible for anyone else's choices. I did not feel like a reservoir waiting to be drained. I felt like a body with its own tide. There would be challenges ahead. Loneliness, doubt. Maybe even moments when the past tried to anchor me again, but I was no longer built for surrender. I had rewired my instinct from give to guard, from absorb to choose. I whispered into the night, not as a vow but as acknowledgement. I am here, not as a daughter defined by duty, not as a sister shaped by sacrifice, just myself, whole, untethered. Enough. The wind answered with a gentle push against my back like a hand guiding me forward. Somewhere inside me, the old version of myself watched quietly, not with bitterness, with relief. She had carried me as far as she could. Now it was my turn. I stayed on the balcony until the stars appeared one by one. Then I stepped inside and closed the door with a quiet click that sounded like a beginning.